Hello,
Yo,
hello, hello, America
Morning.
world. It's the American Awakening Squad. Many of us back to our right spots. We're feeling back home again. I tell you, we miss you a lot when we don't see you, but it's also weird these days because, when you travel, it just feels weird, right? So I used to travel a lot and I used to like it or sort of like it anyway, but this time I'm just like being out of pocket and trying to do the show from the road. And now we're back home, and that means we're going to bring in even 2x energy and focus and light. Since our Wednesday show wasn't bad, but today's show is going to be insanely good, right? That's because Joel's back in Gainesville, and Calvin's back in Boston, and Marissa's back in Boston, and me too. And we've got Tim Dalrymple from Christianity Today, who's going to join us to talk about a little bit of American Awakening stuff. And we've got a great musical guest as well. So let's bring it to Josh Jacob to get us rolling. Josh, what do you have for us, worship man?
Yes. I wanted to go back to 2008 or 2009 when U2 came out with one of their albums. So this is a song from that. It's worshipful to me, So here we go. I was born to be with you in the space and time after that. And ever after, I haven't had a clue, only to break right. This foolishness can leave a heart black and blue. Oh, only love can leave such a mark. Only love can heal such a scar. I was born to sing for you. I didn't have a choice but to lift you up and sing whatever song you wanted me to. I give you back my voice from the womb. My first cry, it was a joyful noise. Only love can leave such a mark. Only love can leave such a scar. Justified till we die, you and I will magnify. Magnificent, magnificent. Only love can leave such a mark. Only love can unite our hearts. Justified till we die, you and I will magnify. Magnificent. Justified till we die, you and I will magnify. Magnificent, magnificent.
All right. JBJ. In the YouTube today.
That was good.
I don't think I know that song. You guys?
No, I'm not familiar.
No, that was awesome.
It's off of No Line on the Horizon. I
Okay.
think. And yeah, the song is called Magnificent.
All right. Well, it's going to be a good Friday. Going to be a good weekend if we're bringing it in with Josh Jacob doing Bono, right?
Yeah, anytime.
That's right.
That's right.
So Joel Searby just back from a long driving trip from Nashville and Gainesville. What do you got for us in the Daily Dose, friend?
Yeah, everybody, welcome to the Daily Dose, a little bit of light and life and truth for your day. So all the next few weeks here, we're taking our Fridays to talk about the book and some of the principles in the book. And today we're talking about doing more with less. So I want to kick it off with that we know that there are so many choices out there, so many things that are in front of us every single day, dozens of posts that we could click on or not click on, hundreds of boxes of cereal, all this stuff. And John touches on this in the book, but he comes to this conclusion. This is a quote from the book. While more options might seem more optimal and liberating, it appears we are more satisfied with fewer choices. So there's something freeing about limits, something very peaceful about constraints, and something very healthy about simplicity. Spiritually, perhaps one of the best things we can do to bring the good stuff that limits produce is to voluntarily impose these limits on ourselves. So that's things like taking a Sabbath rest each week, away from media and all the endless choices, nearer to love and family and nature and beauty. And I don't think it's by accident that rest coincides with renewal. God knew, he knew that we needed to rest and to have fewer things flying at us all the time. And so he desires our flourishing, not our needless constriction. So this weekend, my encouragement as you go into the weekend is to rest, fully rest, and find the beauty that comes in that less being more. That's your Daily Dose. Back to you guys.
That's a good lead in, right, Jeff?
That's good. That's good.
Let's get us rolling here on a little bit of renewal and less being more and all that sort of thing. I think we're bringing in Tim Dalrymple now. And just to give a shout to Tim Dalrymple, special partner of ours. And
Yes.
I'll let Jeff do the official introduction, but I'll just quickly say Tim and I have been friends forever. We've done a lot of great things together. We've got great things in our future together. I believe that. And right now he is stewarding one of the most important organizations in the world of Christianity Today, as president and CEO. We're so proud of him in that capacity, doing great things there. Quick shout out to Jonathan Brooke, who's going to be with us in just a little bit with Dan Hazeltine. We're real excited to turn over to her at the end of the show for a little bit of Minneapolis meets Nashville scene music for us. But right now we'll turn over the reins to Jeff Bethke.
Yes, excited. Another Friday here on the live stream, you guys, which means American Awakening in Focus. And we're chatting about chapter 3, which is longing for renewal and doing more with less, like Joel mentioned. We're going to get into this. I think this is actually one of my favorite chapters from the book. Really resonated with me personally. I also think just what it kind of brings to culture is really, really powerful. Like John said, though, Tim is with us today, and I wanted to just read his bio just so you can kind of have some context for him. I don't know about you either, Tim, but this bio read to me like a superhero, Marvel, Renaissance man. I'm like, is this an actual real life? But apparently it is. Apparently it is actually a real life. And just to note, for those listening or watching, he sent me a more subdued one because, he's like, hey, let's not put in the Stanford part. Let's not put in the Princeton part. Let's only put in the Harvard part. I'm like, okay, well, let's just do that then, legend. But without further ado, let me read this real quick. So it says, Tim, and this blew me, this first sentence, like who has this first sentence in their bio? Tim was a national champion gymnast at Stanford University when he broke his neck in a fall from the high bar. What a start. What a start. Making suffering a key theme of his research, he finished his doctorate in modern Western religious thought at Harvard's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. Tim then helped launch and lead Patheos.com, which most people are familiar with, the giant that it is, which became the world's largest platform for multi-religious conversation. In 2013, Tim founded Polymath, a creative agency that serves businesses and nonprofits serving the world. And lastly, last year, he became president and CEO of Christianity Today, the flagship evangelical media ministry founded in 1956 by Billy Graham. So we can go ahead and welcome Tim. And I wanted to say, Tim, before we just even toss to you for a second, just to say hello, see if you want to add anything before we get this conversation going. I just want to say thank you, man, for the leadership you've been doing at Christianity Today, the way you've taken that baton, taken that helm. Man, I think is exactly what this moment has needed And I just have been profoundly impacted by the way you guys have led in this moment, the last even, longer than last couple months, even last year, et cetera. So thank you. But yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I've been a huge fan of what you guys have been doing at American Awakening and following along. And it's Jeff, you first came onto my radar screen when I was at Pathos, and you put out some videos that, of course, exploded and took over the internet. You may have been one of the first people to break the internet. And so I've been following your career ever since then. Thanks for the kind words on the biography. It's just eclectic and unfocused is what it is. But as John noted, John and I have been good friends and partners for a long time, so it's good to be here.
I love that. Well, we're super stoked for the conversation. So as you guys know, chapter 3 is, again, on Longing for Renewal, Doing More with Less. Let's start here. As I always like to reread it the day before, or I actually read it this morning again, to get ready for the conversation. And I wanted to open it up with, I love John. If you guys haven't read it, get it, pre-order it, get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere where books are sold. But what you really go into is this concept of, you really kind of ask really provoking, thought-provoking questions of, is the fact that we have more choice than we've ever had, more freedom than we've ever had, more ability to kind of choose our destiny and our identity, are these things actually leading to our blessing and our goodness and our flourishing? And it seems like the answer kind of comes out in the middle of like, well, yes, but not really, and that limits and boundaries can actually be a good thing. And so, John, is that what I'm hearing as the kind of the ethos, the thesis of that part, and how this is really, really necessary?
Absolutely, Jeff. And it ties to the conversation we had, ties closely to the conversation we had a week ago on the idea of purpose. Happiness, the concept of pursuing happiness, as happiness would be more options. Like, I like a more refined taste on, my IPA. It's a little hoppier or a little less hoppy, and of course, who doesn't want that slightly more refined, optimized, all that sort of stuff? It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
For one part of our beings, and we all know we're in part animal creatures. Yeah, sure. I mean, why not? More, more taste, more flavors, more options, more, things to sate our desires. But fundamentally, we're a different kind of creature on that other level, that more transcendent level of God and breathing life into each one of us as his children. And we need, like our children do, we need constraints, right? Let a child just do whatever they want, and they seem like some theory that may be happier, but they actually want to figure out who they are, what the box they're supposed to live in. Not literal box, of course, not to scare anybody out there. We don't put children in boxes in the American Awakening movement. But like, so what sort of constraints, what sort of shape to one's life is given, and that is found in limits.
Yeah. Well, let's start there then, because it's the big question that I was wrestling with when I was reading. And even you guys know we do some work with young families in our family teams ministry with our mentors and stuff. And so we see this really hit home in the identity conversation, like you mentioned, right? Okay, does each human, each image bearer have the ability to truly choose their own destiny, become who they want to be? Or is there some limits within there? Yet, how do you then also make sure that it's not just, well, this is who you are and there's no choice? Does that make sense? So I think that's a tough tension. And at least in family context, I do think there's a big misconception that happens with the parent-kid side, or at least the cultural conversation, where I see a lot of times, cultural pushback on the, don't tell your kids who they are, let them go find themselves, find their true selves, all that type of stuff. When the big myth, like the conflation or misnomer there to me is it's not actually true to be able to go find yourself, meaning you're going to steal someone else's identity or someone else's narrative. There's no such thing as you being able to go find a true one out of a vacuum. Like, all you're going to do is, if you're not going to get it from your parents, you're just going to get it from your peers. So it's either a peer-given identity or a parent-given identity. There's no ability to invent one out of thin air, I believe. Would you guys agree with that, disagree with that? And then how do you kind of sit in those constraints of giving someone an identity, I think, which is necessary, receiving identity without too much constraint, if that makes sense?
That seems like a Tim Dalrymple question to me.
I'm happy to jump in. And so, as I was reading your chapter on this, John, first of all, it was fantastic. But also it made me think of what's really a long-running discussion in the Western philosophical and theological tradition on the nature of freedom and what does it really mean to be free?
Mhm.
And so this arguably starts with somebody like Augustine, who's talking about being at war with himself, having two wills, in the same way that you talk about the Apostle Paul writing in Romans chapter 7 about I do the things I don't want to do, and I don't do the things that I want to do. And that is not true freedom, right? So Augustine talks about this kind of these two wills that I have, and when these wills are clashing, I'm unable to really be myself. And this leads eventually to a distinction between positive and negative concepts of freedom. And a negative freedom is freedom from external constraint. You have all the opportunities in the world, right? Nobody's constraining you from doing anything. A positive freedom is more like a freedom of identity. If the first is freedom of opportunity, the second is freedom of identity. And that's the freedom to actually be who you are, right? So if the opposite of freedom is being at war with yourself, yeah, you may be free from external constraints, but you're constrained by sin and addiction, and that's not freedom, right? Then actual freedom is this freedom to be who you are, to be who God made you to be. And when you're doing that, you don't need a million different options, right? I mean, that's almost irrelevant. You just need to be free to be who God made you to be, to rest in him and the identity that he gives you.
That's good. I feel like that, I was thinking, that reminds me, I was reading of this, thinking of this concept of almost like music, right? Where music has this external objective reality where it hits a certain rhythm, it hits a certain beat. You have no ability to change that music, right? The music just is what it is. Yet you have freedom to dance within that music. Everyone who dances does a little different dance moves, hopefully some good, hopefully not some bad, you know? We've all seen that person at a wedding. But I think, but the music doesn't change. And I think that's a little bit of the Christian narrative personally, that there's like this, God's playing this music that has been broken at some level from Genesis, but Genesis, the creation mandate is this music that we're free to dance within, but not free to dance like off rhythm, if that makes sense, because that's not actually dancing within the music. I don't know. Would you guys agree with that? Do you feel like that lands, that sticks? Is it terrible? I don't know. I just thought of it.
And Marissa's eyes are gazing.
Yeah, look at that face, Marissa. That's like the look out. That's the emoji. That's the emoji right there.
You know, so I don't know. I may wind my way back there, but I've often thought about, you know, going back to what you were saying earlier, Jeff, about, you know, parents being like, nah, just like let him go, let him run free. And I often think about like how free I felt growing up when my parents, you know, tying it again just to sort of our social moment where we're at, when my parents were like, look, we live in an all-white town. There are some things that you should not do. There are some ways that you should not be. When you understand the constraints of our society right now, when you see your boundaries, you can make decisions about how you can flow more freely. And you know, to maybe the outside ear, that might sound like, you're like constraining. You're not allowing, you know, kids to just do whatever they want to. But the greatest love in the universe is the love of somebody who sees what's up ahead and cares enough to say, my child, I love you. I'm not going to throw you to the wolves. I'm going to set you up for success by letting you know that there's some stuff going on here that is not great. It's not of me. It's of some other things, and I want you to flourish. So stay here. And again, that doesn't mean like you can't be president of the United States. It means like sometimes when you're driving and you get pulled over, keep your hands up.
Yeah.
Right.
But that begs the question.
You know.
That begs the question of the opposite, though. That I think, because I agree, but then how do you then wrestle with making sure that the people in positions of power don't use that in a weaponized way? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I mean,
stay constrained, be in this, don't, you know what I mean?
No, totally. Again, right. We want to flow with movements for justice and transformation. But in the meantime, I will not do my child a disservice by not letting them know about the world in which they live.
Yeah, both and. Yeah.
You know, and I'm thankful for that, because it's not just a commentary on, you know, sometimes being Black in certain parts of America. It's also just a commentary I feel on our spiritual lives. Yo, this is a fallen world, y'all. It's a fallen world. Stuff ain't right. If you can stay here, you can have easier access maybe to peace, easier access to joy, easier access to contentment. You go all outside the lines and you let it go all over the place, it might be a longer road to pull you back to the place where you really want to be.
So,
Yeah,
so does that introduce the idea of like, okay, and which feels a lot like the Christian, I guess, journey, at least for me, right? Like the greatest gift or one of the greatest expressions of love has been your choice, your freedom to choose. He's actually created this space for you to choose him, right? And so in that, I think there's that call, I think, for all this. Will you even lay down the freedom I've given, right? Like, will you submit? Will you be obedient? Will you follow me, right? But I guess then can you only operate in that freedom, or even under that leadership, if that trust is there? Because like what you're saying, Marissa, that like, again, that true freedom of being like, okay, I trust you enough to that you will set up these boundaries and that I can flow freely within them, right? Trusting that it's for my good and for my best. It's, you know, to your point, Jeff, it's hard to imagine that unless that trust, that love is there. You can be secure in that love. I mean, so even before freedom, does there need to be a trust, a love of relationship?
Well, I trust that hopefully, you know, our prayers for all kids, right, around the world. You pray that your parents love you enough that when they give you constraints, it's out of love, right? There is this kind of trust that like, okay, yeah, maybe I won't go there. Maybe I won't go to that certain part of town after a certain time because you love me and you're saying, look, I see something else that maybe you don't see yet. There, you know, God, I trust you. All right. Maybe I shouldn't just go all out of the, you know, do whatever I want to do, you know, listen to whatever it is that's going on the inside of me if it's going against you because you love me.
And the reason why, sorry,
Ahead,
the reason I think ultimately where it's going is because, again, like we've been talking about this kind of recently, but even like the government, right? How often do people trust their government at this point? Right. And so even then, when there are constraints, legal constraints of how we operate, how we do society well, you know, it's even then, do we trust them enough that, like a parent, right, that sets up constraints that it's for our good, right?
Yeah, and I would say, Calvin,
go ahead.
that choosing to follow God is not an abdication of our freedom or a diminishment of our freedom, right? It's an expression of our freedom. And then living in obedience to God is when we are most truly free because we're acting out of who we are, who God made us to be in a right relationship to him. The choice of anything other than God essentially makes you enslaved to sin, right? Which is its own kind of enslavement. And so it's like people ask, you know, is there anything God can't do? And then the question eventually comes up: couldn't God act in a way is he free to act in a way that's contrary to his character? Then people say, well, that's not really freedom. Freedom is to act according to your character, right?
That just took me off the deep end. I don't know what just happened right there. That was.
Sorry about that.
But no, I agree. I think is this the collision point though, right now in our culture of what we're talking about right now, of Marissa's kind of vision of Christian freedom is actually a constrained love. There's like this love that the sacrifice for the other. Here's what I'm trying to say. Like, I think the collision point right now I'm seeing, would you guys agree with this, is that this is where the Christian witness, I think, differs from the cultural ethic of this concept of freedom, this concept of, you know, take what is it? Patrick Deneen, is that how you pronounce his name? Why Liberalism Failed, one of my favorite books the last couple of years. He kind of argues this is where it was always going, like liberalism in the secular form. Is just this how can we kind of keep taking off the shackles and just more and more and more and more autonomous, you know, more freedom, you know, less shackles, more freedom, and all these different types of things, when the Christian witness seems to be the antithesis of that at some level of like, I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm willing to put on willing shackles, right? Like myself as an act of love, as an act of sacrifice. I mean, Jesus himself, the embodied experience is him limiting himself. I'm going to put on flesh. That's like a limiting experience for the sake of another. And so is this the point of collision where the Christian ethic is really pushing up against, I think, the cultural ethic right now of, you know, what love is, what freedom is, what choice is, and how those things go hand in hand?
Wow, we've gone meta in so many different directions. We went Augustine. Somehow Calvin went government. I'm not sure how the government got into this conversation. But
This is why I love Fridays.
yeah, exactly. We're taking the shackles off and going big in all sorts of different directions. I think, undoubtedly, your point is right on that, Jeff. And it goes to basically what the whole book. Everything we do in the book is, and so many of my teammates here on the screen contributed to it. So and thank you all for that. It goes to the definition of who we are as people, and a lot of the definition of who we really are as people, as children of God, is contrary, as Jeff's implying, to the definition that the cultural streams will tell us. And this is right smack dab, one of them. Like, okay, so you should get your own, get some power. You should get more power. You should pursue your own, material ends. You should get more options. You should whatever. Those are all things that are told to us in the liberal experiment, as you say. By the way, everybody, when we say just to be clear for folks at home, listening in, when we talk about liberalism, we're not talking about liberals versus conservatives.
The left.
The left. We're talking about the whole project of the whole democratic rights and freedom.
What a mess of language. It's always annoying. You have to clarify that. But
Yeah,
it's
right.
true.
It's very challenging.
Yeah.
Very
We're talking liberalism as opposed to fascism, communism, etc.
Yeah. But the whole project of having inherent rights and the opportunity to pursue your own and get freedom and all sorts of ways, which is a great thing. It was an extraordinary development on the world scene when the United States project launched 244 years ago. But unconstrained, it becomes tyranny of its own. It becomes tyranny of ourselves. It does not allow us to be the people we're really meant to be, which gets us back all the way to the heart of the conversation.
Well, that's Deneen's argument in his book, and Professor at Notre Dame, of it actually is, we're in this moment not because of, and this was written like 4 years ago, not because of liberalism has failed, but because it's actually succeeded too well. And that's a really, I think, provocative argument, that it's like, it's so reached its logical conclusion, to liberate everything and anyone.
There's a really important principle in this part of the conversation, which is the only way it works is by mutual submission and sacrifice. And when a whole bunch of people decide, like, I'm not sacrificing for you, I'm only getting mine. And that includes Christians, by the way, people who claim Jesus are like, no, I'm just getting mine. Then everything kind of breaks down. So it ties back into the whole, how do we live communally as people of God and as a society when it's all about what I want and you're not willing to put any constraints on yourself. It pretty quickly becomes the only way, like you said, Jeff, is for a clash to happen.
Yeah.
John, in the chapter you talk about just kind of this, I think that the American temptation to believe that just the acquisition of more and more and more is going to give me greater freedom, financial freedom, right? We talk about financial freedom, and is going to lead to greater and greater happiness. And just the fact that is so plainly not true. And yet people spend their entire lives pursuing that theory. And it brought to mind, I just wanted to mention one example, and this is a gentleman named Alan Barnhart. I'm not sure if his name has come across your desk.
No, not familiar with Barnhart.
But Alan and his brother Eric, they inherited a business when they were younger. And it started off very small. It was in their house, and they grew it to something that does over $400 million a year annually now. But right from the beginning, they, together with their wives, set a finish line that said, we're going to earn up to this amount, and then anything we earn beyond that, we're not going to take it. We're going to give it away, reinvest into the business. I think they started at $40,000 or something like that. As their kids got older, it got a little bit bigger, and now it's something like $100,000 a year. And yet they own this business that generates vast amounts of money. And so they've been able to give away, I believe it's hundreds of millions of dollars over the years, as they've capped they've basically said, all we need to live is this amount. Anything beyond that, we we'll give away. And that's just an amazing example of providing some sort of healthy limitation on myself. It reminds me of, I think it's in Proverbs 30 somewhere, where he says, protect me from poverty and wealth. Don't let me have either. Don't let me be tempted to steal in order to provide on the one hand, and yet also don't let me be tempted to think that I don't need you anymore. And so these are people who created some constraint, and yet it unleashed this incredible freedom that they've been able to give so much to, causes that they really care about.
Yeah, that's a great example, Tim. We talk about all sorts of practical, applications. Are in the book. It's less meta than we're talking about here, and anybody who knows me knows I love to go big abstract concepts, but I try to limit myself in the book so that people can understand, like, it's at a very tactical level. But we use examples like that, illustrations of people that have chosen very self-consciously to stay within limits. We talk about Warren Buffett, the top 3 most wealthiest person on the planet, has earned over $100 billion the course of his life, and still just plays in his plays in his local neighborhood bridge game still the same way as he did 50 years ago, before he had his first $100 billion in his pocket, and stays in the same house he bought in 1956. And that is, of course, deeply countercultural. I mean, nobody does that anymore, right? We just float up to the highest potentiality we might realize, and we get bigger places, we get more elaborate experiences, and on and on. But we try to give people examples of staying within constraints, and how staying within those constraints of time, of money, of activities, somehow paradoxically, but truly and deeply makes you freer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, have you guys seen that? What's that study? Wasn't it done like a decade ago? Kahneman or whatever. There's no your life satisfaction doesn't grow above $75,000 per year. You know, like you can make $10 million a year, or you can make $76,000 a year, and you're generally speaking about the same level of happiness. What do they call that? The satiation point, right? And once you cross that level, it's basically a moot point. I mean, which for inflation, I don't know, that's probably 85 grand, 95 grand now a decade later, but that's crazy, And of course, that's still a high salary for a lot of people, 95 grand. Yet I don't think we have to wrestle with the fact, though, that we don't believe that, though, even if we're not making that much money or not.
Well,
do we believe if we make $1 million,
I'll spin it one turn further, Jeff, which is, look, I'm on the air with you guys and speaking in the book as a guy that's tried the other way. I don't talk about that in the book, but I don't self-consciously try to reject the principles I'm articulating, but I have in a lot of ways de facto rejected the principles by the way I've lived my life. I mean, I'm not trying to, but so I've rolled with these people that go larger and larger and larger and larger, and sometimes I've gone larger and larger and larger too. And I'll tell you what, no matter where you are on that spectrum, you're not thinking, oh, I am so grateful for that first 100 million. And by the way, I haven't earned 100 million, but the people that are in the spaces, I'm so grateful for that first 100 million I've earned. And boy, I am just so situated well to do something. It's like, you know what? I'm better than that guy that has 500 million. I mean, it's so insidious. Totally. It is so insidious, and I'm not trying to call anybody out. I'm not trying to say like anybody's bad who does that. It's just our nature. If you give into it, you will want more, thinking that somehow more will be better. It's just a thing. It's just a thing, and at whatever level you are in this whole scale, which sounds crazy, folks, but I've hung with people like that. I've spent time with billionaires and multi-billionaires, and they're not thinking to themselves, "Oh man, I'm so glad for the freedoms I've gotten." Whatever they're thinking.
Yeah. Well, even and we can end on this, and then any final words. The research came back around just like the last couple of years, and it supported exactly what you said, John. Not only was it the satiation point, above that to change is nothing, but then they started to find that actually above that number, it actually decreases it gets harder. So that's fascinating, right? That's very fascinating that there's like a peak, and then it's like anything more than that, there's going to be some serious difficulties with it, whether it's relationally, whatever, mentally, emotionally. But I think it's something to warrant to think about, that leaves it practical on the end of this chapter. So any final thoughts from anyone before we toss to the Dan and the music?
I want Tim to give us at least one more wrap up thought if nobody else does. But I just to say, look, guys, we talk about it all the time on the show, so it's not unique to this chapter. But we talk about the concept of Sabbath rest, which is inherently a limiting. It's a self-abdication moment. Say, you know what? I could do more work. I could have more fun. Fun, quote unquote. I could go, make more money. I could go, and it's saying, you know what? I'm just going to trust that actually there's something bigger than me going on. One day a week, I just slow it down and say, God, you're bigger than whatever, and I'm going to live within the constraint of this. We talk about that a lot on the show, and so Joel talks about it a lot in particular.
Yeah. I love that. Well, even by the way, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Tonight, our family, we celebrate Sabbath last 5 years. We light a candle, and that's exactly what we say. We say exactly what you just said, John. Say there's nothing we can do more to make God love us more, love us less. And we certainly could do more work, but at the end of the day, we're going to cease and stop and honor the person who keeps the world spinning even while we're sleeping.
Wow.
So, man, what a reminder tonight, that I think all of us can remember as we go into the weekend. And I wish more people honored a true rhythmic Sabbath. But Tim, bring us home with that Yoda, Sage, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, Brown, all the other colleges you went to. Wisdom.
Have you ever been called a Marvel superhero before?
No, I don't think so. But I'm going to tell my daughters about that when I get home.
I know your daughters look
mental Marvel superhero.
Well, I think to end on the point that you guys are ending on, and that the chapter ends on. I mean I've lived in houses that have practiced a Jewish Sabbath. I've spent a lot of time in Israel where you see people doing all of these preparations in advance so that they won't have to do anything on the Sabbath, right? And it does build a beautiful rhythm and kind of seasonality into your life that I think reminds you of the most important things. And we are in a time of just extraordinary anxiety and dislocation, and we're seeing COVID spikes again all around the country. And, people who might have been thinking, okay, I'm ready to go back to a regular rhythm are finding maybe not. And it just does seem like this is an opportunity when a lot of people are, and I think when a lot of us have the opportunity to rediscover the virtues of rest and time at home with your family and slowing down the pace and remembering the deeper things of life. So definitely think you're on the right track and appreciate your words.
Amen. And right now is the time for that, like you said, for everyone listening, tuning in, and watching. So thanks again, Tim. Week 3, American Awakening. This was a blast. So I appreciate it big time for bringing your Marvel superhero love to the show. And it was a blast. And there's the book. And without further ado, we'll toss over to Dan and the music crew. Let's end it out.
Well, hello from Nashville and Minneapolis here. So every time I get on here, I feel like I have to sort of gush a little bit about the artists we get to have. But today we really have an amazing. I've gone through the list. I've known about Jonathan for a long time. I was a huge fan when she was part of the duo The Story. So this would have been way back, and I've even learned that she was really part of some of the writing of songs that I listened to much earlier than that. I saw that she was she was credited to be a songwriter with the Hooters, fantastic of the 80s, like just incredible. So she's a multi-instrumentalist, producer, songwriter, arranger, playwright, composer, performer, all of the Ers, and teacher. Also, and so she's just this incredible artist that we are just so glad to have her with us today. She has credits and collaborations with artists you may not know, maybe you do. I do. Madeline Perot, Maya Sharp, some of the ones that really stuck out to me. Kathy Mattea, John Gorka, Finn. Chris, yeah. And I'm gonna take too long, and you're never gonna get to actually talk to you, because I'm just gonna keep going about all these amazing things that you're a part of. But I did want to say also, though, that she's also a playwright in the sense that she did a one-woman show back off Broadway called My Mother Has Two Noses, which really dealt. Or has four. Sorry, I read that wrong. Has four noses, right? Yeah. No, it's two. Yeah, it has four noses. Okay, great. Yeah, I typed it wrong, and I don't know how to read. So, but it was about her relationship with her mother, who was suffering from dementia at the time, and just And then in 2019, we're just going to mention this, and then we'll kick it over to you. Grand prize winner, overall grand prize winner in the 15th Annual International Acoustic Music Award for one of her songs that she penned and performed.
Wow.
Just,
Wow.
yeah, I know, right? Just all that stuff. So anyway, without saying too much, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us, Jonathan Brooke. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.
How are you today?
I'm pretty good. My brain is exploding from all of that stuff that just happened. You know, Marissa, well, I'm still chewing on, this is a fallen world, y'all. And I'm like, okay, got it. And then the whole idea about the freedom and the liberty inside being constrained. And that's blowing my mind too, because of like the whole mask thing. So anyway, so
yeah,
I have to write some more songs today, I think.
Good.
But,
well, you know, I usually do ask a lot of the artists first off just what this season has been like. We're in this really odd time when a lot of the artists I talk to have a lot of anxiety. This has been a season where they've been some have been really paralyzed to be able to write because things have been so much just it's too fluid for them. And you obviously I've been following some of your shows online and things like that, but has this been a creative season, or has this been a season of anxiety for you?
It's been all of those things. It's been super, super anxious because my whole year was wiped out. So I'm not touring. I'm not able to teach in person. So it's like most of us have had to sort of reinvent ourselves. So I'm doing a Monday concert every week called, it's my kitchen COVID concert. It's live from my kitchen. And I do like a pretty formal concert. I like really plan it and I work on it. And so I do that every week, and I've been teaching master classes online now, but it's been a scramble, and there's anxiety around that because the future is so uncertain, and it seems to be stretching out way longer than any of us anticipated. Sort of the big unknown of like, wow, will we ever be able to tour again? Because singing is one of the most dangerous things you can do right now. Like, who would have thought of that?
Yeah, well, it's true. And in more ways than one, even beyond just the health issues, we know that music has an incredible power. So, yeah, I take a lot of. We're going to talk about a couple things, but I want to let you go ahead and play some music for us.
Okay, I'm going to sing you a song. This is the song that won the thing in the.
And with the stuff, yeah, good.
It won that stuff. It's called
You good?
Down. Put the gun down. Come talk to me. You got a lot of nerve. You're bitching about your freedom. You say you had it rough. Everybody got their cross, so you bear it up, yeah. You seek your prophets, you're telling your laws, and then you carry on, carry on, carry on. You carry on, carry on, carry on. Nobody done you wrong. You carry on, and you put the gun down. Was your daddy mean? Your mama couldn't be saved. No one keeping you clean. Or is it just attention that you crave? Put the gun down. Nobody has to lose. You got no way out except forgiveness. So you better choose, and then and you carry on, carry on, carry on. Carry on, carry on, carry on. Nobody done you wrong. But it's Tuesday, you can make it to Wednesday. Thursday, you might feel the sun. Friday, knows nothing about Saturday. Sunday don't need no gun. So don't aim, don't swing. Nobody has to bleed. No fat lady gonna say you may never get what you need. So you carry on, carry on, carry on. You carry on, carry on, carry on. Nobody done you wrong. So you carry on, carry on. You carry on, carry on, carry on. You carry on, carry on, carry on. Nobody done you wrong. Just carry on. You put the gun down. You put the gun down.
Woo!
Yeah. So good.
So good.
Wow.
So good.
Incredible.
That was fantastic. Thank you for playing that one. It's such a timely, I mean, obviously timely right now for all of us. You now up in Minnesota, in a state where we've all been kind of paying attention, seeing things go drastically wrong and some go right. And that song means, seems very connected to where you are right now. So, right.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. One of the things that I've observed, and it may or may not be true, I think it's true though, is that we don't see a lot of protest music. We don't see a lot of artists, maybe outside of really hip hop nowadays or rap music, that are looking at the world and describing it in a way that allows us to see it and then make changes. That's sort of my definition of protest music, is someone really describing something well. But you do a lot of songwriting teaching now and mentoring in that space. Are you seeing people being affected by sort of our current state and writing in that space?
Yeah, and I think that it's such a tough thing to write in that way, to write an anthem of sorts, and it's never been a something that comes easily to me. I tend to sort of inhabit the smaller story inside the bigger issue. So I've written political songs, but always from a very singular storytelling place of like, well, this is just this character in this moment telling this story. And I think that's how I can get away with, a more potent message in a way. And so I talk about that when I teach. I talk about, yes, you can write The Times They Are Changing. You can write
Right.
Home Is Your Land. I'm not good at that. I'm a storyteller. And so that's how I approach it. And so I talk specifically about that. Like, think about how your story could be even more potent if it's just put the gun down and come talk to me.
Yeah.
Like I need to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that feels so true in most situations, right? Where we are enamored and interested in the shiny object of a cause, but it doesn't really connect us. It just sort of, it sparks our interest for a little bit. But once it becomes about a relationship or a person, and we can actually distill it down to a human being and a human story, then it actually is something that penetrates our hearts and minds, and we can actually find ourselves passionate about people changing in the midst of those causes. So I think you're absolutely right on that
There's
that
even
front.
this, like, it's funny because I don't think it's meant to be a political song at all, but there's this pop song that I'm a little bit obsessed with, and I forget the name of the singer, but basically it's the hook is like, if the world was ending, you'd come over, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, that could be like, that could really be an anthem right now.
Yeah, I know. But wear your mask and stay 6 feet away from me
Yeah,
at the
like,
same time.
quit with
It's,
the
yeah,
wearing
yeah.
stuff.
Okay, we're being told it's a Halsey song. So great. Great. Good to know.
I thought it was someone named Julia, somebody, and they made it into a duet because it was her and her boyfriend, and they had a fight. And then there was the video about like them fighting and then getting together because they finally realized that like they were both thinking, well, if the world was ending, would you come back over?
Yeah. I didn't actually mean that. Yeah. So that's great. Good. I did want to just yeah, I know our times are short these for the show, but I'd love to hear you play some more music. But first, do you have a new project?
I do.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that now.
Yeah, this is my new, I don't know if you can see this. This is my new project.
Yes.
It looks like I haven't really changed my clothes, huh? It's called the Sweetwater Sessions, and I recorded it as part of a recording workshop last fall at the Sweetwater Studios in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Amazing studio, amazing music emporium. But it was a workshop about recording, and then it started sounding so good that we ended up staying a couple extra days and recording a whole record of a sort of retrospective of Jonathan Brooks songs, all of the favorites that maybe didn't make it onto a live record ever, or that I'm in love with, but didn't get as much airplay as I would have liked. So it's 11 songs, and it sounds awesome.
That's great. I love that you've had the opportunity to kind of take the things that you love, you make, because you're right. A lot of times they don't make it into those other elevated spaces, but they really are the songs that kind of, they glue everything else together. And so I always love when we get to be part of those kinds of projects.
Yeah, like there's a song that I wrote for a Peter Pan movie, the Walt Disney movie, Peter Pan Return to Neverland, which was a big deal for me. It was one of my biggest songs. It's called I'll Try. And, yes, it's been out there a lot and like it's been all over the world, but I don't have my own recording of it that that I've done since the 20 years ago that I recorded it. So that was really fun to re-record. And there's like now 2 generations of people that love that song and come to shows. And so that's on the record too. That was exciting to redo that one.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, would you be willing to play us another song?
I could do that.
Great.
I'm going to just detour and be a little more, I don't know. This is called #Lullaby. Because I'm just feeling that way. Okay, here we go. Whoops. I usually stand up when I sing. There's fate and there's fury, go hang the jewelry. No one's gonna sleep tonight. A hashtag for everything, a battle hymn for you to sing, but nothing's gonna make it right. You choke down all the reasons. Another night burns by. No one ever sang you a lullaby. But everybody was somebody's baby. Every baby got some kind of destiny. And who we once were is not who we may be. Everybody was somebody's baby. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your grandma's hands, but you broke her heart. Lost the game before the start. No cherry gonna swing that low, and going home is gonna tear you apart. You choke down all the reasons. Another night burns by. No one ever sang you a lullaby. But everybody
was somebody's baby. Every baby got some kind of destiny. Who we once were is not who we may be. Everybody was somebody's baby. I got nothing left of what God gave me. Losing is my finest art. But one kind thing, one simple song might save me. And my broken heart, everybody was somebody's baby. Every baby got some kind of destiny. Who we once were is not who we may be. Everybody was somebody's baby. Everybody was somebody's baby. Every baby got some kind of destiny. Who we once were is not who we may be. Everybody was somebody's baby. Well, there's fate and there's fury. Go hang the jewelry. No one's gonna sleep tonight.
Yeah.
Wow. Whoa. Whoa.
Brilliant.
Come on, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
that is the core message of American Awakening. Right there.
Oh, good.
I mean, for everybody, right?
You can have it as your theme song.
You know,
That's awesome.
I mean, the idea that everybody matters, has purpose, has meaning, significance, and has, you know, a place they're supposed to go. That is
Amen.
what the American people are missing. Folks don't feel that. They don't know that.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that's what, you know, everybody longs for, that love of a parent, you know, of that love.
Yeah.
Fatherly love.
Yes. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking some time with us today. It's great to see you. It just, I get this sort of goofy grin on my face when I hear you play and sing, but I you know, I'm such a fan and a respecter of just all the various ways that you've brought music into our world. So thank you. I look forward to hearing more.
Yeah, and don't forget my kitchen concerts Monday
Yes.
2 on my Facebook Live page because they're fun.
Yes, please go visit that. Go be a part of those, experience them. They're fantastic. Jonathan, you are an amazing storyteller as well as, you know, that is cohesive with songwriting. However, the actual spoken word and singing together, both incredible. So check that out. Check out the new project, Sweetwater Sessions, wherever you find music, wherever you find great music. And yeah, thanks for being on the show. We'll kick this back to you, John.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Tim Dalrymple. What a Friday show. I'm sorry for the podcast listeners. I'm not supposed to mention it's Friday show, so I'll take that back. What a show. What a show. This was fantastic. I loved it. And to finish with that rousing reminder for all of us about who we are and that we all have an important destiny. And God's still got us. God's still taking us from wherever we are to wherever we're supposed to be. So keep that in mind, y'all. Look forward to being back with you. Until then, the American Awakening Squad tells you we love you. We pray for you. We're thinking about you here in America, around the world. And keep fighting the good fight. And God bless you until we're back together. Thanks all.